And Yud Shvat, of course, is the day that this discourse was given, the original discourse of the previous Rebbe, that was given out in 1950 for the day that he was to pass away. And then the Rebbe, 1 year later, in 1951, gave over the discourse that we're studying today. And what many, even Lubavitchers, don't know is that it is actually today marks 100 years since the previous Rebbe first recited this discourse in Rostov. Rostov is a city in Ukraine. Rostov is a city in Ukraine, and since World War I, the fifth Chabad Rebbe had to relocate from Lubavitch, from which we get the name, to the city of Rostov. So when he passed away in 1920, his son succeeded him, and in 1923 he was in Rostov, and that was the first time, actually on this particular day, of Yud Shvat, 100 years ago, 1923, Rostov. Was anyone there 100 years ago in Rostov? No, okay.
Close. I have a guest staying with us from Toronto, and he's telling me his father, his father is not well. He's got all these problems. He's turning like 103 or something. So he could have been 100 years ago in Rostov as a child. But anyway, so the previous Rebbe recited this discourse the very first time in Rostov 100 years ago. So it's quite a significant day and a very special day, the day of the Yortzeit, the day of passing of the previous Rebbe, and the day that the Rebbe basically assumed leadership in the year 1951. So it is all around a very special day for us to be studying and for receiving blessing from the day. We can each make a resolution of connecting to our Yiddishkeit in a stronger way. Doesn't have to be something earth-shattering. It could even be a very small thing. It's very big in the eyes of Hashem, but it's a very special day for connection. So we'll make a l'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvarei. Amen.
I think for sure you should be able to say l'chaim on coffee. It's almost in the name. Okay, so we will bring up the mimer here. So this is now page 7. If you have the sheets, great. So we're going to run through this and kind of go briefly through some of the sections. We're not going to cover every single line because some of the ideas get pretty Kabbalistic, which requires just a lot more background information. I think it's better if we go forward to get the gist of the discourse here. So
chapter 4.
We're in chapter 4, yes, which should be page 7. Here we go. Bottom of chapter 6, it says chapter 4. Then chapter 4 continues on page 7 in the sheets. Having explained, are we in sync?
I don't see page 7, but I have chapter 4.
You have chapter 4. Okay, having explained. It should start with the words having explained. If you're there, then you're in the right place.
Having explained. No.
It's on page 6. What about page 6?
I'm not
sure. Another set of papers.
I'm not sure how it got repaginated.
Because I have 5 is coming after 4, but it's only a page and something, chapter 4.
So we're on a paragraph that should be after this blue header of chapter 4, or maybe a gray header. It says chapter 4 in bold, and then having explained.
Oh yeah, it starts with having explained.
Right. Then we're on the same page.
Okay.
Maybe not the same page number, but the same page. That's the main thing.
Okay.
Okay.
having explained that the essence of the Shekhinah was originally apparent in this lowly world, and that in addition, Moshe, the seventh, later drew it down specifically into this world, right? So that was the major thrust of the discourse until this point, right? That the main place of the Shekhinah is down here. God brought about his divine presence in order for it to be able to reside here in this physical world with us. And I'd say in a more personal way, for God to reside within each and every one of us. Which means, in simpler ways, God desires to have a relationship with me personally. That is a key idea here. But there is the place where you have the Shekhinah primarily, and then from there it extends. So divinity, godliness, was primarily revealed within the Beit HaMikdash, and the Rebbe supports this with the pasuk. It says, "And they will make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell within them." So the verse does not say that it should say, "I make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell in it." But it doesn't say within it, but rather within them, implying that God dwells within each individual Jew. Wow. One of the most profound insights into Yiddishkeit here, right? That betocham is betoch kol echad ve'echad mi Yisrael. Wow. So the Rebbe then continues that this concept can give us insight into the verse that the righteous shall inherit the land. We went through this last week. I'm just going to basically say that we're going to go forward. We're going to skip over this. We did it last time. With this in mind, we can better understand the interpretation of the verse upon which this discourse is based. That Bati Lgani, I've come into my garden, I've come into my bridal chamber, meaning I've come into my special place where I really belong. The Shekhinah here speaks of its return to the original location of its essential abode. Where is the original location of the Shekhinah? Where does it really want and wish to desire? In the midst of the nether beings. That's us. And as I've explained above, truly the lowest place, where is the lowest place? If we're
here on earth is the lowest place.
So where would you say, where on earth is the lowest place?
The Dead Sea.
The Dead Sea. Well, there are places in the ocean which go much lower than that, if you want to talk lower, but we're not talking geographic lower. We're talking about places that are the furthest from God. So which place on earth is the furthest from God?
Deep higher. The center.
Where is that? The center?
The center.
Okay. So I'm going to share something with you.
I think the darkness.
Some people would say Mississippi, but I disagree with that. That was just a joke, a bad joke, sorry. So the lowest place, I'll give you a hint, is a place that can actually deny the existence of God.
Egypt.
Do you know of any space in this world that can deny the existence of God?
Your own heart.
Right here. This is the lowest realm. Right? Right here. Our own mind is the place that can come to the absolute worst conclusions about God. And a person can actually come to the conclusion that God does not exist. Right? So that is really the lowest realm. So we have all of these other things and all of these other ideas and concepts, but our own mind is the place that could come to the conclusion that there's no God. You know,
okay, Rabbi, that rarely happens. Rabbi, that rarely happens in Yiddishkeit. I mean, from my experience, let me just put it that way.
Well, it's usually happening outside of Yiddishkeit, right? I mean, you're right. It may rarely happen in Yiddishkeit, but outside of Yiddishkeit, that is why people, it's what we call Yanigalachter, a joke that's not such a joke. It's like if you're talking to somebody and they say, "Oh, excuse me, sir, are you Jewish?" No, I'm an atheist. Where are you from? Brooklyn. If they're a Brooklyn from atheist, if they're an atheist from Brooklyn, they're Jewish, right? That is, that's kind of code. And unfortunately, for whatever reasons, mostly I think having to do with a very poor description of what we're talking about when we're talking about God, and people not really having a good sense of what that means. So, sorry, just having some insulin pump complications. There we go. So people have a poor, the idea of God was not really explained to people, so they get the wrong notion. And as Reb Levi Yitzchok of Berditchev, there was even in Berditchev in 200 years ago, in the town of Berditchev, there were Jews who didn't believe in God. So he's speaking to a particular Jew, and he told Reb Levi Yitzchok of Berditchev, he said, "I don't believe in God." What did Reb Levi Yitzchok of Berditchev respond back?
The same God you don't believe in, I don't believe in either.
Excellent. The God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. That is so beautiful, and it's so true. Right? It's not that people don't believe in God. They have a construct of God that they have created, and they don't believe in that, right? But nevertheless, a human being.
But it's a double negative, Rabbi. They create their own disbelief, but it really is a belief.
When you have a couple that, yeah, for sure. Right, it's a belief. But my point is, a person who can deny the existence of God, that becomes his narrative. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe had such great belief, he didn't believe in atheists. So the Rebbe didn't believe in atheists, and that's kind of our message. You can't necessarily say that outright to an atheist because they're just going to become entrenched and offended. But the Rebbe didn't believe. The Rebbe believed this idea, right? That if you don't believe in God, you simply have the wrong idea of what God is. But getting back to the point of the mimer, even a person that can say, "I don't believe in God, I don't believe in the Torah, I don't believe in all these rules. I think religion is the opiate for the masses, and it's just meant to keep people stupid." Okay, all of these ideas I disagree with, obviously, and they're wrong, but the human being can come to that conclusion. God created a world where that is a possible conclusion. And I will tell you, Susan, I've got news for you. There have been large segments of Jewish people who believe this, and unfortunately are no longer part of the Jewish people, nor are their progeny. Okay? You have this today, it's a big thing, but you had it also in Europe with socialism. You had huge swaths of Jewish youth going to socialism and buying into that ideology. So it unfortunately is an affliction of our people. Even in the Pew studies that they've done on belief in God, when you talk about how many people believe in God, how many people are unsure about it, right? The Jewish people rank the highest in not believing in God in the United States, for example. All I'm saying, Susan, it's a reality. But I'm saying the positive side of that is that this is the place where God chooses to reside, you see. This lowest realm, he created a place where we can actually deny the existence of God, which means that for us to believe in God is of our own volition. It is our own desire. Or, so to speak, we have to create an image of God in our own mind, in our own heart to believe in. This is a very low realm. If you were in a higher spiritual realm, you would not have the possibility of denying the existence of God. If you were in the world, the spiritual realm above us, Yetzirah, the world above that, Beriah, the world of Atzilut, there's only God. It's not possible. God wanted a place where it would be possible to deny his existence, and yet in that place, we would create a home for God. You see, I'm just pointing out what the lowest realm is and why this is the lowest realm. So going back to the mimer. So the Alter Rebbe explains this in the following manner. We did this a little bit last week, and we're just going to jump through this quickly. So the ultimate intent of the progressive chain-like descent of the world is not the loftier worlds, since this constitutes a descent from the light of God's countenance. Basically, meaning that we kind of did this, and I'm not sure. Just from my records, it looks like we didn't finish this this section, but I'm going to just run through this idea briefly, and that is that if God himself, in God himself, he has ultimate and absolute perfection. The highest worlds that people oftentimes think, oh, the higher spiritual realms, wow, that's really what it's all about. Let me get to Gan Eden, for instance. Let me live this life so I can get to Gan Eden, which is a higher spiritual realm. Chassidus comes along and says the higher spiritual realms, you can't say that that's where God, that's the purpose for God, because they are a tremendous descent from God himself. God himself is above any light, any level. He's above any measure. In fact, God is beyond any dimension. We can't even imagine God at his essence. So why did God bring all of this about, going down from level to level? You know, a person can go into a glorious mansion, a great palace, and end up in the in the foyer and say, wow, this is an amazing place, and make himself comfortable and think that that's what it's all about. Or he can go to a more exotic room and another exotic room. These are all very exotic rooms, but the ultimate is connecting with the king himself. So all of these higher realms are a descent for God. God was making his light lesser and lesser. So even though there are enormous levels of light in the higher worlds, they're a descent for God. But really the point is that, and the point that the Rebbe makes here is that the truest expression of the essence of God is in this world. Strangely enough, because we have a sense of ego, you see, the higher worlds are lacking ego. Ego can only come about, our ego, which is our sense of selfness, and is oftentimes the source of selfishness, but our whole sense of ego, you know what the root of the word ego is? It's from the Latin ech, like the German ich, I. Ego is I-ness, basically. And so in the higher worlds, there is no ego because they are totally aware of God and the source. But we in this world, we have a sense of ego, which ultimately is because we have the possibility of connecting to the very essence of God. So it's a strange kind of dichotomy. Susan, I see your hand is up.
Yes, but didn't God make it easy to connect to him? And he also made it hard to connect to him for some people. When I get up in the morning, I say, thank you, God, for another day you gave me.
I did that too this morning.
So, and it's so easy, it comes naturally.
Right, but sometimes it happens to me. Sometimes I say it without thinking about what it means. You know, you get the ritual, which is great to be into the ritual, but you have to let the ritual be into you. That's the harder part, right? And so I find the same thing. It's on the one hand, and my first thought is always it's hard to connect. The other hand, you can connect anytime, at any moment. You can just decide, I want to connect with God and make this real to me. There's so many things competing for that connection, from within our own self and our own psyche, and from without. So God specifically made a place, a world where I would say it's not necessarily easy. In fact, there were 20 generations that went by from the creation of the world, right? You'd think the people so God created the world. So Adam, okay, of course, Adam, he was connected to God. He knew, yeah, but even though he knew God directly, personally, do I know God, right? God knows me. We're on a first name basis. Well, at least God was on a first name basis with Adam. And how long did it last until they ate from the tree of knowledge? 3 hours, our sages say. They were created, and really within 3 hours, they had already made this cosmic, they have already performed this cosmic sin. So I would say, Susan, I would beg to differ. God created a place where it is not easy. But that is all part of being the lowest realm. But on the other, why is it not easy? Because we also have our own sense of essence, our own sense of self, that we think we think that we are the be all come all. So we have our own ego, and Chassidus explains that this sense of ego-ness is somehow or another derived from God's essence. And we also learn that through our performance of mitzvot, this actually becomes the vehicle for drawing godliness in his most essential form into this world. And so that is really, this is from the teaching of the Mittler Rebbe. Although this perception of a physical creation, that it's being derived from its own self, is but its own false impression. So our sense of ego-ness and selfness, and that we just come from ourselves, even though that's false, nevertheless, the very fact that we're able to imagine it derives from its own results, from it being rooted in God's essence. And his being derives from his essence. So God is the true ego, the true essential entity. And the fact that we can have a sense of essential entityness or ego derives from God, even though God is true and ours is not. So basically what the Rebbe is saying is that this physical realm is the ultimate purpose of all of existence, because this is where we can have the ultimate sense of the essence of God. It's a little heady. It's a little bit hard idea, but let's go further. We're going to go further again through to chapter 5. So chapter 5 now starts talking about the world of Atzilus, and we're talking about the vessels in the world of Atzilus. Are you familiar with the idea of light and vessels? So in the higher spiritual worlds, particularly in the world of Atzilus, we have God, and it's God, but how can God become manifest in different ways? So Kabbalah explains that you have basically an essential light, which is shining through a particular vessel, like an idea of a light shining through a different colored glass. You're gonna look at the light and say, oh, that light is green, that light is blue, right? It's not true. The light is not blue. The light is pure essential essence, but it's just we're perceiving it through a particular lens. So the question is, here we go into discussing the nature of the vessels. So here we say one opinion is that a level of revelation of that which was previously concealed Yes, Susan.
Rabbi, we are the vessels. Are we not?
For the infinite light of Hashem?
Yes.
Well, we're also the vessel for the negative side, for the Sitra Achra.
We're both, of course.
So here,
We
when we
have to have
talk,
both. In
when
order
we
to have
talk-
one, you have to have the other.
yeah, that is the human. You're talking about the human situation, the human condition.
Yes.
Here, he's referring to the world of Atzilus, where they're only a vessel for the divine light,
Okay.
right? But you know what? Chapter 5 goes into the level of the vessels and the lights. We're just gonna pick a paragraph or two out of this to go through, but it gets very esoteric, which I'd rather stay away from. So the Rebbe Maharash explains that these illuminations in Atzilus are there as if in storage. That is, they are not revealed there, but they are intended not for that world, but for the lowly worlds, where they will be revealed with the arrival of Mashiach. And the Rebbe Rashab takes that further and says that the ultimate intent of the progressive chain-like descent of the worlds is not the loftier worlds, since for them, going to the lofty world is actually a descent from the light of God's countenance. So he explains that the higher worlds are characterized by revelation, which implies descent. You see, every revelation, and this is another lofty idea, but we can understand it. Chassidus really speaks a lot about this idea that revelation is a descent. Now that doesn't sound right, does it? Revelation, what are you talking about? Revelation is a descent. So let me share with you. If I have an idea in my mind, when my idea remains in my mind, it is in its source. It's not going to be misunderstood. It's not going to be minimized or diminished. It's going to be understood with its full import. All of the details are going to be properly understood. When I reveal that idea to someone else, it is now a descent. Whenever you reveal that information, on the one hand, it's a revelation for the recipient, but it is a descent for the revealer. Whereas the essential level is the highest level, where things may not be revealed, but they're at the level of their essence. It looks like Susan has a problem with this. Susan, please speak up.
Okay, I've been watching the Fabrengas of the Rebbe from the 1983, and it's very clear what he's talking about. Whereas when I'm reading what you're putting on the screen, it's very esoteric. Whereas when I listen to the Rebbe and those videos, he makes everything very clear, very simple words, and he touches on Kabbalah, but he makes it in such a way that I understand what he's talking about. And I'm not a brain. I mean, I'm just a simple person, you know.
But you have a brain. That's all right. Bear with us, Susan. Some of these things are esoteric. I have to tell you, Susan, when you're watching a video of the Rebbe, they're taking things that are easily understood, of what the Rebbe said that are easily understood. There is a lot.
Editing. You mean they're editing what I'm watching?
They're not editing. They're selecting what you're watching.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
You know, so
I'm sorry I interrupted about
no, that's okay. That's okay. We are delving into things that are more esoteric. And if you don't understand all of it, we'll get back to less esoteric soon, okay? And I said this particular section is
okay. I'll catch up.
But I want you to understand that there is plenty that the Rebbe spoke that was very esoteric and above my head, totally. But they're not putting that onto the screen for us to watch because people aren't going to understand it. So things that are more easily understood, they're going to go and put that on the internet, and people are going to click on it and say, "Oh wow, it's
Okay.
it is. Oh
I
wow."
get what you're saying.
Anyway, but here we're doing stuff that may be a little more esoteric. You're right. The point that we're making here is the following point. Let me try to let me help you understand it. And that is, the higher worlds, you have more revelation. You have the revelation of light. In the lower worlds, you don't have the revelation of light. And that is why it's more difficult to connect, because we don't have the revelation. But on the other hand, it is specifically in this world where we can connect on an essential level. It's a little bit of a hard idea to explain, but let me try. You can have a love of two people where the two people basically create an idea of, let's say one person brings the other one person a gift, and the other person gives a gift. And one person says something nice and the other person says something nice. And, the two people are getting along very well, but they're relating to the things that you have done for me and the things that the other one has done for the other, right? They're relating to revelation. The ultimate point of a relationship is the essential connection. And that's why in this world there is less revelation, but there is more essential. So this is a world where it's fraught with difficulty, with challenges. And as I mentioned, Jewish people in large amounts, probably maybe even more than the amount that we have today, that have gone away from Judaism because of all of these challenges. Because the whole point is that we have the challenge and we rise to the challenge. The ultimate objective then is this lowly physical world. For so the idea arose in God's blessed will, that he experienced the light. You know what God experiences the light from? When the forces of evil are subdued and darkness is converted into light. God gets a tremendous pleasure when we have a challenge. So let's say you're with your friend and you have some juicy bit of gossip to share. And it's going to make such good conversation. And then your friend is going to have a nice piece of gossip to share. Then you say to yourself, 1 second, it's an avera, it's a sin. Gossip is a force of evil. When we say forces of evil, sometimes we use these words, forces of evil. Yeah, we're talking about gossip. Or maybe you're driving by a restaurant and you're saying, "No, it's not really kosher," but that's a force of negative, a force of evil. The things that are not in keeping the mitzvot, right? We have 613 commandments. It's all right, only about 200 apply today, much easier. So when we have the impulse to do the wrong thing, that is what makes this world the lowest realm. And this is what gives God the greatest joy. This should be a great assistance for us. This should be an amazing assistance for us to help with our impulse control. Anybody here have any issues with impulse control? I'll raise my hand. I do, right? Maybe I'm the only one. But we have an impulse to do something negative. It might not be horrific. It might not be a felony or a misdemeanor, but it's wrong to do, and we have an impulse to do it, and we overcome that impulse. You know what we just learned? That God, for reasons that we can't understand, God has tremendous delight, tremendous pleasure from this. Yes, somebody had a question or comment? So this manner of service
results. Oops, sorry. Got to go to, well, there we go. So this manner of service results in providing God with a dwelling in the worlds below. So how do we make this world into a home for God? By basically practicing this impulse control. When we do or say the thing that we shouldn't be doing or shouldn't be saying, we are pushing out God's Shekhinah. We're pushing out God's presence in this world. That doesn't mean God isn't here. God is everywhere. But we're talking about where God desires to be. Have you ever been in a home where a couple was bickering? Aside from your own house. You're in somebody else's home and the couple is bickering, right? It feels very uncomfortable. Or the parent is maybe, yelling at the child and maybe a way you feel is inappropriate. You don't feel at home in such a place. You don't feel comfortable in such a place. Hashem says, I want you to make a home for me, a place where I feel comfortable. And how will you do that? Through observing the Torah and the mitzvot. And where does God want this dwelling? Specifically in the most difficult place. God didn't bring his presence world to world to be in some higher spiritual world. God wants it where it's down and dirty and difficult and challenging. This is where he wants a home, in our mind, in our heart. So this manner of service results in providing God with a dwelling in the worlds below. And just as a person's entire essence and being dwells in his home, so too with regards to our spiritual task of making this lowly world a dwelling for God, it results in drawing down not only manifestations of divinity, but also the infinite essence of God. So the Rebbe says here that an amazing point. Where do we, where is our true place of belonging? Some people, unfortunately, feel that their true place of belonging is in the office, making money, or in their sports car, driving around, showing off to people. This is not our true place. Home is our true place. In fact, how do you say home in Hebrew? Ben Zion, you have to help us out here with the Hebrew. How do you say home in Hebrew? Bayit, right? Bayit. You know what bayit means in the Torah? Bayit means on the inside. That's what home means. It's a place of inwardness. When we're home, we make ourselves at home. We don't have to put on a pretense. We don't have to put on I'm acting in a particular way. That's why sometimes at home, sometimes we do have difficulties, husband and wife, because everyone's acting themselves, then all of a sudden you go to somebody else's home and everybody's on the best behavior. In your own home, you're not on your best behavior. That's a good thing, because at home, you're acting at home. Now, God is, of course, always on his best behavior. That's not an issue. But the point is, when we say that we want to make a home for God, that means where God can be himself, his very essence. In the higher worlds, God manifests, God reveals. In this physical realm where it's difficult for us to serve, where there are challenges, but we overcome those challenges and make this world into a home for God, this is where God's home is. What do we mean his home? Where his inwardness is, where his essence is. All of the other spiritual realms were just the freeway and the side streets to get home. So oftentimes people have the whole notion of Kabbalah backwards. They think we're down here in this physical realm and we have to go and reach a higher world. Well, there is a truth to that. But Chassidus explains, no, those higher worlds are really only there in order for us to make a home for God here in this physical realm. This is the purpose. The challenges and difficulties that we endure in serving Hashem, that's what it's all about. Yisrael or Yehudis, please.
the ultimate, of course, is when in the times of the Mashiach, which would suggest that that our world, our realm will be it'll be a utopian world. Is that what Hashem's ultimate ideal is?
Well, very good question. So what you're saying, in a sense, contradicts a little bit of what I just said, but it's a question. It's a very good question. If the point is for us to have a struggle and difficulty and overcome the struggle, well, isn't the point when Mashiach comes? Yes. So the whole point is that ultimately, through every time that I push away a negative impulse, right, I'm making the world a little bit more a home for God. When we do this collectively as a people, ultimately the world itself will become a home for God. And how is that manifest? With the coming of Mashiach and the building of the Beit HaMikdash. And that's what the Rebbe said in an earlier section here, that the main revelation of godliness is in the Beit HaMikdash. And that, of course, is the ultimate idea of the home, the world being a home for God. But then the question is, in the time of Mashiach, we won't have these struggles and challenges like we do today. It says, and I will remove the spirit of impurity from the world. So 1 second. So then what's going to be the point? So the point will be, there will still be more levels to refine and purify. So in our life, we're reaching towards connecting with God. So right now we have to pierce through actual levels of evil that are standing in the way, actual levels that can denounce, and castigate God. That's our reality today with Sitra Achra. But as we reach up towards God, when can you finally reach God? Well, God is infinite. So at this point, we have to pierce through the Sitra Achra. When Mashiach comes, we're still going to have many levels to ascend, to reach higher and higher. And other challenges, they won't be challenges of, shall I deny the existence of God or embrace the existence of God, but it's going to be in the existence of God itself, we're going to have higher forms of reaching up and higher to God. And there will be challenges in that respect. But again, it won't be the choice between doing a sin or doing a mitzvah. It'll be a choice between doing one mitzvah or a higher mitzvah, so to speak. And so it's like, you remember on the radios, maybe they still have it today, when you had the dial, you had the one dial in the cars, I think. You had one dial to get to the general location, then you had the other dial for the fine tuning, right? So right now we have the gross tuning. We have to break through the negativity. But once Mashiach comes, the world will be a home for God. But as God is infinite, there's going to be other levels to reach each year after each year, each 1,000 years after each 1,000 years. So we are right now in creation, we are in the 6,000th year of creation. The Kabbalah talks about 49,000 years of creation, and what's going to happen in the 50,000th year, which will be the Jubilee year for the first 50,000 years. So we're just at the beginning of whatever it is that we're meant to accomplish. And right now we're really doing the grunt work, working through the klipot and the Yetzer Hara. But the work will continue, but on a more rarefied level, on a higher spiritual level. I'm not sure if this was your question, Yisrael, but...
Yeah, I guess what that tends to do is shatter the misunderstanding that when Mashiach comes, it's a utopian world and that it's a time of perfection. It's not the ultimate perfection. It's just, as you just expressed, the fine tuning. So it's not an ideal world at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, it's relative, right? Compared to now, it'll be the time of ultimate perfection,
Okay.
right? But the
Yes.
and even in Gan Eden, it says that the tzaddikim have to go from one level to the next. They have to go higher and higher. I just want to make sure. Benzion, what's his English name? I want to make sure he's okay. He might be asleep. I see him with his head down.
Sometimes Ben falls asleep. Sometimes
Oh, okay. All right. Fine. As long as it's normal, then it's okay.
I've seen it before. It's okay. I think.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. All right. Okay. So, good. All right. Let's go a little bit further in the mimer. We're going to start a little bit on chapter 6. So now we're going to go into a whole interesting area of the Beit HaMikdash. And this is let's see, I have, let me just find my document here, see if I can find the, I don't have the pictures here. Maybe I can find online. So we're going to be talking about the actual building of the Mishkan. And I just want to show you what we're talking about. If I can find some pictures, possibly.
Rabbi Wernick showed us some pictures one time in the Code of Jewish Laws. He explained how everything was supposed to be built and how many pieces of wood and how far apart and all
Excellent.
that stuff.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, so you saw the beams basically look like beams, but they come from what we call from acacia wood. And here we go. I'm not sure. We don't know exactly if we have the right if we have the exact right species here, but this is Atze Shittim, the acacia wood that was used for the building of the Mishkan. So you saw the beams and how they were they actually created the chamber of the Beit HaMikdash. But now we're going to focus simply on the fact that they are called Atze Shittim, acacia wood. The word Shittim is associated with a Hebrew word, shtut. Shtut means folly, frivolity, stupidity. Shtut. And the Rebbe is going to be talking about the idea of how we take. Now, what is frivolity? What is this level of shtut? Like in Hebrew, you'd call something, if somebody was doing something silly, you'd say, shtuyot. Or you want to say, oh, that's so silly, right? You say shtuyot. So what is shtuyot? What are shtuyot? Shtuyot are when you veer from normalcy, right? You veer from normalcy. So if you make a funny face, right? I'm not going to do one, but I can. I've done it for my grandchildren. If you make a funny face, people laugh at it. Why? What did you do? You veered from normalcy. Some veering from normalcy. That's a hasata. And that's the idea of shtut, means that you don't go in the path of normalcy, but you go, well, we're going to see. You can either go below normal or you can go beyond normal. Both of them are called a veering. So the word actually comes from a root meaning to veer from normalcy. So if you veer from normalcy, there's two different directions you can go. You can either have shtuyot, folly, or you could have a veering of doing something that appears maybe folly, but really you are transcending normalcy. So let's just do a little bit of reading inside. We'll come back to this, of course, next week. So, at the conclusion of the Mimer in chapter 5, the Rebbe explains that the Beis HaMikdash was the principal place wherein the essence of the Shekhinah was revealed within this world. And he goes on to explain that is why the Mishkan was made of acacia wood, since Shittim, acacia, is related to the word shtut, shtus, in the Ashkenazi pronunciation, which means folly. For man's goal is to transform the folly of unholiness and the animal soul's passion, that is folly that's lower, that brings us lower than reason, into the folly of holiness, which is a folly that transcends even the rationality of holiness. So you can have a folly, a shtut, so to speak, a veering where you're actually going higher than normal. And they bring examples of this. As our sages said concerning a certain instance of such conduct, the venerable sage has been well served by his folly. What was that talking about? Well, this is an amazing story of, now I'm forgetting which sage it was. I'm thinking that it was Rabbi Yitzchok, but I could be mistaken. I'll have to look. So there was a wedding, and at this wedding, you know, you go to a Jewish wedding, so there's going to be some young guys or young gals who go and they do all different kinds of things to make the chassan and the kala happy, right? Now, what if you saw the chief rabbi coming in? Is he going to start doing those things? Usually not. He'll dance in the circle with everybody, right? But he's not going to be like the star performer. So this rabbi from a sage, a scholar from the Talmud, who was a great holy individual, he would come to the wedding and he would become a star performer. What would he do? He would take myrtle branches and he would juggle with them. You ever tried juggling? I know you can't juggle, but you can imagine even as juggling goes, juggling branches is even more difficult. So he would come and entertain the chassan and kala by juggling these branches. And some of the rabbis felt that it was inappropriate. He's going and, doing this type of activity at a wedding. This is beneath his dignity. This is how people think, right? It's beneath his dignity. He understood that a chassan and kala, these are aspects of God coming together. This is the greatest joy. And he did it to make it more joyous, to participate in the joy. Anyway, when this great rabbi passed away, there was a pillar of fire that went out in front of his coffin. And this was a common thing described in Kabbalah and in the Talmud of great individuals. When they passed away, there was the presence of God right in front of their coffin in the pillar of fire. And these rabbis who had initially thought low of him, right, because he was acting beneath his dignity, now they said, this folly of his worked in his favor. Ahane le shtuse l'saba. So the shtus, the folly, the seeming frivolity was right on. It was perfectly what he was supposed to be doing. And that's what the Rebbe says here. The venerable sage has been well served by his folly. For this was a degree of self-effacing divine service that transcended even holy intellect. Right? So you understand the point here of folly in holiness. We find a very similar thing with King David, right? So when the ark was brought back to Yerushalayim, King David was the first one who was rolling on the ground, dancing and doing the craziest kind of dancing around. But he was the king. He was the king of Israel. Is this proper conduct for the king of Israel? His wife thought, no. His wife was the daughter of Shaul, who had a whole different, staid, venerable. We always have to, right? But when it comes to the presence of God being revealed in the world, all bets are off. I'm going to go crazy. People have a hard time with that. People have a hard time with handling this high level of frivolity, higher, so to speak, folly. It's not folly. It's maybe not a good word, but shtus. We call it in Hebrew, we call it shtus de kedusha. It's frivolity in holiness and happiness.
that when you go to the wedding, you go and do some silly, crazy thing to make the chassan and kala happy, right? So this is a departure. This is a whole new level. And this, the Rebbe explains, this is why they use this particular wood in the building of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, because this wood represents what? Shitim, shtus. You have to veer from normal. You have to become abnormal. Not lower than normal, higher than normal, right? Much higher than normal, so that our whole conduct is in a totally transcendent state. So that's what we're going to be coming up to in this next section. So we will continue with this, God willing, next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
Wonderful,
you, Rabbi.
wonderful class. Wonderful.
Hopefully we got from the esoteric to the lesoteric.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody.
You're welcome.
Good.
We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Well,
Go to.